On the coldest night of the winter, when the wind cut like a blade and the snow swallowed all sound, a man who owned a castle fell to his knees before a woman who owned nothing but a small hut and her pride. His hands shook, his breath came out in weak white clouds, and in his eyes was something no one had ever seen there before: fear. Honoria Ashworth had learned long ago how to survive without warmth. Not the warmth of fire alone, but the warmth of kindness, of belonging, of being seen. She lived at the edge of the Ashworth estate in a forgotten gamekeeper's cottage, surrounded by hills and trees that did not judge her. Silence had become her companion, solitude her shield. She believed she would never again know the comfort of another human soul. That belief ended the night the Duke knocked on her door. But long before the snowstorm, long before the castle froze and the hut glowed with firelight, Honoria had already lost everything. The scandal had begun quietly, as scandals always do, with whispers spoken behind gloved hands and eyes that slid away when she entered a room. Her husband, Phineas Ashworth, had been dead barely 2 weeks when the first rumor reached her ears. She was still dressed in mourning black, still carried his handkerchief as if it held the last trace of him, still woke each morning expecting to hear his soft cough from the next room. At the funeral reception, Lady Euphemia Blackwood had cornered her near the tea table. Her voice was sweet, but her words were sharp. She asked whether it was true that Honoria had helped her husband die, whether the poor Duke's fragile heart had been pushed just a little too far. Honoria remembered the teacup shaking in her hand, the heat rushing to her face, the cold spreading in her chest. She thought it must be a mistake, that grief had made people cruel. That truth would settle everything. But truth never arrived. Morning came, and with it more whispers. The whispers grew into accusations. The accusations hardened into belief. No court judged her. No law condemned her. But society did something far worse. It turned its back. Phineas had always been weak in body but strong in spirit. His lungs had never fully healed from a childhood illness. Honoria had married him, knowing their time would be short. She married him because he was kind, because he listened, because he treated her as a mind, not a decoration. Their life together had been quiet and happy. Books by the fire, slow walks in the garden, long talks that lasted deep into the night. When he died peacefully in his sleep, Honoria believed her grief was the end of her suffering. She was wrong. Phineas's mother, the Dowager Duchess Theodora Ashworth, had never hidden her dislike. From the beginning, she had called Honoria a fortune hunter, though there was no fortune to hunt. She believed her son had been trapped by a woman beneath him. When Phineas died and left his widow a modest inheritance against his family's wishes, the Dowager saw her chance. She planted the rumor carefully. She reminded people that Honoria had been alone with her husband, that she prepared his tea, that she found his body. The doctor said his heart had failed. The Dowager whispered that doctors could be persuaded. Within a month, Honoria's world collapsed. Invitations stopped. Friends vanished. Shopkeepers served her with stiff politeness. She was never arrested, never tried, never formally accused. But she was punished all the same. Then came the final blow. A solicitor arrived with papers that took her breath away. The Ashworth estate was entailed. Everything belonged to the next male heir. That heir was Phineas's older brother, Duke Benedict Ashworth. Honoria had met him only twice. Both times he had looked at her as if she were something unpleasant dragged in on a boot, cold, silent, unforgiving. She was given 1 week to leave the house she had shared with her husband. She could take her clothes, her personal belongings, and the small sum Phineas had protected for her. It was enough to survive, not enough to begin again. She had nowhere to go. Her parents were dead. Her childhood home was gone. Her sister loved her, but could not risk her own standing by sheltering a woman accused of murder. So Honoria chose the only place left to her, the gamekeeper's cottage. It sat at the far edge of the estate, hidden among hills and trees, a small stone building abandoned years ago. She remembered it from walks with Phineas on his stronger days. He had spoken of childhood adventures there, of a man who taught him birdsong and patience. She arrived on a gray November afternoon with 2 trunks and 1 carpet bag. The cottage was worn but solid, cold but standing. She cleaned. She scrubbed. She worked until her hands burned. She made the place livable. The villagers watched her quietly. They asked no questions. They offered help without judgment. The blacksmith fixed her latch. The baker saved her bread. The old apothecary brought remedies and stories. In that quiet corner of the world, Honoria built a life from nothing. She woke with the sun, lit her fire, made her tea. She read. She walked the hills. She learned the land. She learned herself. There were nights when loneliness pressed hard against her ribs, when she would have given anything to hear another voice. But there was peace, too, a strange freedom in answering to no one. Winter came hard. She prepared as best she could, but nothing prepared her for the storm. Snow fell without mercy. Wind screamed through the hills. For 3 days the world vanished. On the 4th morning, silence returned. Snow stood nearly to her waist. The sun burned cold and bright. She was clearing a path to her woodpile when she felt it, the sense of being watched. She turned. A man stood at the edge of her path, tall, wrapped in a heavy coat stiff with ice. His movements were slow and unsteady. When he lifted his head, she knew him instantly. Duke Benedict Ashworth. She did not move. She did not speak. She watched as the man who had taken her home struggled to stay upright in the snow. His lips moved, but no sound came. Then he swayed and fell to his knees. She should have closed the door. She should have let the cold finish what pride had begun. Instead, she moved. She pulled him up, guided him inside, stripped away frozen cloth, sat him before her fire, gave him hot tea, wrapped him in blankets, watched his hands shake as he drank. He did not speak for a long time. Neither did she. At last his voice broke the silence. "Thank you." 2 simple words, fragile as glass. He slept in her bed while she sat by the fire watching over him. The Duke of Ashworth, reduced to a man who nearly froze alone in his own castle. When he woke the next day, he looked around the small room as if it were another world. He said her name carefully. She answered with his title. He tried to leave. She stopped him. The snow was still deep. He was still weak. He stayed. Days passed. The storm melted into memory. Conversations grew where silence once ruled. He spoke of duty, of loss, of a woman he once loved and buried. She spoke of grief, of exile, of learning to live alone. One night, by the fire, he asked the question they had both avoided. "Did you harm my brother?" Honoria met his eyes without fear. "No." She told him the truth, simply, fully. He believed her. Something loosened in her chest, a weight she had carried alone. He admitted his failure, his anger, his jealousy, his fear of feeling again. She did not excuse him, but she understood him, and in that understanding, something new began. Outside, the snow melted. Inside, walls began to fall. Neither of them knew yet where this path would lead, only that the night a frozen duke begged for warmth. 2 broken lives quietly changed forever. When the roads finally cleared, Honoria expected Benedict to leave at once. The castle waited for him. Duty waited. The world he belonged to stood ready to close its doors again. Yet each morning he remained, standing at her small window, watching the hills as if he were afraid that stepping outside would undo whatever fragile peace had begun to form. "You could return now," Honoria said one morning, her voice steady though her heart was not. "Yes," he answered. But he did not move. He stayed another day, then another. At first, he offered reasons. The repairs at the castle were not complete. The pipes were still unstable. The servants had not fully returned. But Honoria saw through the excuses. She saw the way his shoulders eased when she poured tea, the way his eyes followed her when she crossed the room, the way silence between them no longer felt heavy, but safe. Their days settled into a gentle rhythm. They shared meals at her small table. They read aloud by the fire. When the weather allowed, they walked the hills together, speaking of nothing and everything. Benedict pointed out landmarks from his childhood. Honoria showed him hidden paths she had discovered during her months alone. Slowly, The man she had known only as a cold figure in black coats revealed himself. He spoke of Oxford, of books and languages, of dreams he once held before duty closed around him like iron. She listened without judgment. He listened to her in return. About her father who encouraged her mind, about Phineas, whose kindness had shaped her heart, about the pain of being erased by society without ever being heard. They did not speak of the Dowager Duchess. They did not speak of accusations, but the past lingered in the quiet moments, present as breath. One evening, as firelight flickered across the walls, Benedict asked a question that startled her. "Why did you help me?" Honoria considered him carefully. "Because I knew what it meant to stand alone in the cold." He did not look away. "You had every reason to turn me out." "Yes," she said, "but bitterness only freezes the soul. I have lived long enough in the cold." That night something shifted. Not love, not yet, but recognition. Two people who understood loss standing on the same ground. When Benedict finally returned to the castle, it was not a farewell. It was a beginning. He came back 2 days later. Then again, each visit longer than the last. He walked from the castle regardless of weather, refusing a carriage. He said the walk helped him think, and Aurea suspected it helped him feel. The villagers noticed. Whispers began again, but these were softer, curious rather than cruel. The Duke of Ashworth, walking alone through snow and mud to visit the outcast widow. Honoria did not ask him to stop. Benedict did not ask permission to continue. Their bond deepened in quiet ways. He brought books from the castle library. She shared her journal entries, pieces of herself she had never shown another. He listened with care she had not known since Phineas. She challenged his rigid beliefs. He questioned his own walls. One afternoon, by a frozen stream, Benedict stopped walking. He looked at the ice, then at her. "I have been living half a life," he said. "I thought numbness was safety." "It is only another kind of prison," she replied. He reached for her hand. His touch was hesitant, as if unsure he was allowed. Honoria did not pull away. The moment felt vast and terrifying and right. Spring crept in slowly. Snow retreated. Green pushed through brown earth. With the season came change Benedict could no longer ignore. He asked her to walk with him through the castle. Honoria hesitated at the gates. Memories pressed hard against her chest, but she went. Inside, the damage was clear. Walls stripped, floors torn up, rooms empty and echoing. Yet Benedict spoke not of loss, but of possibility. He asked her opinion. He listened, truly listened. "Would you consider staying here?" he asked quietly. "As my guest?" Her breath caught. "People will talk. Let them," he said. "I am done living for their approval." She agreed on one condition. She would not return as a dependent shadow. She would return as herself. The castle did not warm overnight. Neither did society. The Dowager Duchess raged from afar. Letters arrived filled with poison. But Benedict stood firm. He defended Honoria publicly. He challenged the whispers. He placed his reputation between her and the world. Slowly, opinions shifted. Not all, not completely, but enough. Their friendship deepened into something neither could deny. Yet fear lingered. Honoria had loved once and lost. Benedict had buried hope years ago. The truth came out one summer evening in the gardens. "I was watching your cottage," Benedict admitted, "before the storm." Her heart stilled. "I told myself it was duty," he continued, "but it was guilt and something else." "You cared," she said softly. "Yes," he said, "before I allowed myself to know it." She forgave him then, not because he deserved it, but because she was tired of carrying pain that no longer served her. He loved her openly after that, without hesitation, without pride. When he spoke the words, they were not dramatic. They were steady, certain. "I love you," he said, not as an escape, not as a replacement, but as a choice. Honoria thought of Phineas, of the love they shared, of the man he would want her to be. "I love you too," she answered. The world did not stop, but something inside her did. The waiting, the guarding, the fear. They married quietly in autumn. Friends from the village stood beside them. The castle doors opened, not to grandeur, but to warmth. The outcast had become Duchess. The frozen Duke had learned to feel. And though storms still came, they no longer faced them alone. The cold had lost its power, and love, born in silence and snow, finally had room to grow. The first year of marriage felt like walking on newly thawed ground, beautiful, uncertain, and fragile beneath each step. Honoria woke each morning in a room larger than her cottage had ever been, sunlight spilling across tall windows, and sometimes she had to remind herself that this life was real, that she had not been cast out again, that the warmth surrounding her was not something borrowed, but something built. Benedict changed in ways that surprised even himself. The man who once hid behind duty now moved through his days with purpose. He walked the estate daily, speaking to tenants by name, listening instead of commanding. He oversaw repairs not only to walls and roofs, but to lives long neglected. He improved housing. He modernized farming. He opened a small school for village children who had never held a proper book. Honoria watched him with quiet pride. She saw the man he had always been beneath the ice. She found her own place slowly, not as a decorative duchess, but as a working one. She reorganized the household, not for show, but for fairness. She improved meals for servants. She turned an unused wing of the castle into a refuge for women with nowhere else to go. Women like she once was, cast out, judged, forgotten. The whispers never fully stopped. Some never forgave her. Some never believed her innocence. But time softened what anger could not. New scandals replaced old ones. Society grew bored of her story. The Dowager Duchess did not. She refused to see Honoria, refused to acknowledge the marriage. Her letters were sharp and bitter. Benedict answered none of them. "I lived too long ruled by fear," he told Honoria one evening by the fire. "I will not let it rule me now." Their love was not perfect. They argued. They stumbled. Benedict's temper flared at times. Honoria's silence returned when old wounds stirred. But they learned how to fight without cruelty, how to apologize without pride, how to listen. They chose each other daily, in small ways, and difficult ones. They never had children. The grief came quietly, settled, and stayed. They mourned together. They did not let it hollow them. Instead, they filled their lives with other forms of love. The women from the refuge, the children from the school, the villagers who had once welcomed Honoria when she had nothing. Years passed. One winter morning, a letter arrived that brought unexpected stillness. The Dowager Duchess Theodora had died peacefully in her sleep. Among her belongings was a journal. It contained confessions, poisoned whispers, deliberate lies, and at the end, regret. Honoria read it with tears that were not angry, only tired. She chose not to release it, not to seek final vindication. "I already have justice," she said. Benedict understood. The cottage remained standing at the edge of the estate, restored, warm. They visited it every winter. They sat by the fire where everything had begun. They remembered the storm, the knock, the choice. Years turned silver. Honoria's hair faded. Benedict's steps slowed, but their hands still found each other in silence. Still fit, still warm. On winter nights when snow fell thick and the wind howled, they sat together and watched the flames dance, and Honoria remembered the woman she once was, alone, accused, certain her life was over. She smiled at the truth she had learned. Love was not rescue, it was not destiny. It was a door opened in the cold, a fire shared, a choice made again and again. The castle was warm now, and so were the hearts inside it. The Duke who once begged to enter now walked beside her through every season, and the outcast was home.